part of your August calendar, and for others, this may be your first annual meeting. For those who are new and first-time participants, we extend a special welcome and invite you to join our efforts to promote end-of-life planning and end-of-life options that are respectful of personal autonomy. Thank you for being here and exploring with us today. We want you to know that you are welcome to contact Compassion and Choices volunteers and staff for further information. Members of our Community Education Enhancement Work Group have been working diligently planning this meeting with the theme, Stay Strong and Carry On. Compassion and Choices is the nation's oldest, largest, and most active nonprofit organization committed to empowering everyone to chart their end-of-life journey. We educate, empower, and defend. We encourage you to this virtual meeting. Feel free to stretch from time to time. If you have questions for our speakers, I invite you to put them in the chat. And
yeah, Marilyn, I think we lost Steve. Do you want to take over?
I'm sorry?
Did you want to take over? Or?
Yeah, I think if you need to take a little break, get an extra cup of coffee, we're not going to have a formal break, so just go ahead and take care of your business. And I think Steve is back on. Did you have any more comments, Steve? You're on mute, I think, Steve.
It says I get an unstable connection. I don't.
Yeah. I think what I'll do.
I'm sorry about that.
Oh, there we go.
I have an unstable.
Yeah.
You're on, Steve.
You can proceed, Steve.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay.
I'll pick up. The planning team invites you to give your name, location, and personal pronouns if you wish. You may accomplish that by clicking on the three dots in the upper right-hand corner of your computer screen and follow the drop-down menu. Marilyn Cruz is a highly valued volunteer for Iowa Compassion and Choices. Marilyn leads the Community Education and Enhancement Work Group and the informative Finish Strong Iowa webinar series. She is intimately involved with the newsletter and the dashboard feature of Iowa Compassion and Choices. I will now invite Marilyn to introduce our keynote speaker.
Well, good morning, everyone. So glad you could join us. We're delighted to have a great speaker this morning. And in planning this meeting, we wanted some inspiration, kind of a pep talk, if you will. But we also wanted to have someone who really understood the challenges we face in Iowa. We're a state not exactly known for bodily autonomy. I think through our Compassion and Choices contact, Angela, she led us to the right person. And that person is Molly Graziano. Molly is the Director of Outreach for the Ohio End-of-Life Options Organization. She is working to grow a statewide community of support for medical aid in dying. She has extensive experience in nonprofit leadership roles, including helping to alleviate food insecurity and successfully leading a team to improve and grow hospital organ donation programs. Molly likes to tackle topics head-on with both positivity and even some humor. She is known for her forward motion mindset, and isn't that what we really need in Iowa? On a personal note, Molly lives in Cleveland with her husband and rescue beagle. So please join me in giving Molly a virtual welcome and show her some Iowa nice. Molly?
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay. Now, I hope it's okay. I couldn't resist because I often use, if you build it, they will come here in Ohio to talk about bringing people into the tent that is end-of-life options and medical aid in dying. Plus, it also happens to be one of my favorite movies. So I'm sure you all probably hear this quite a bit, much like we always hear references to Buckeyes, but I hope you'll indulge me in this a little bit. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much to Angela for connecting Marilyn and I. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. We'll talk a little bit about what's happening in Ohio, because I think it's important to give you a little perspective to see maybe what similarities are happening between Ohio and Iowa. Whoops, my screen isn't advancing. Let's see. Let me try something else here. Put y'all over here. I can't. Okay. So as Marilyn said, I'm Director of Outreach for Ohio End of Life Options. I kind of came to this world in a roundabout kind of way. About 8+ years ago, I saw that our executive director was doing a presentation at a local library. How I got on this email list, I don't even know how I got on the email list. I've never gotten an email from this email list after or before. So I think it was definitely meant to be that I was supposed to enter this world from the world that I had come from. And I went down and talked to Lisa, and she was a nurse by training, and I had 30+ years in the nonprofit sector. She was just starting Ohio End of Life Options as a result of an experience that she had with her stepdad, who lived in Oregon and used Oregon's death with dignity law. And after she had had that incredibly profound experience, she came back, started talking to folks in Ohio. And of course, the question was, well, why don't we have anything like that here in Ohio? So I don't think it was on her bingo card to start a nonprofit organization, but bless her heart, she went ahead and she did it. And here we are, 8+ years later, growing our community of support. So I'm born and raised in Ohio. And as Marilyn said, I've spent 30 years working in different issues. And the interesting thing that I think has kind of helped me work in the medical aid and dying and end of life space is that I've worked on issues that when they were at their grassroots level were not understood by the public. There was nuance. We had to find new and creative ways to kind of communicate things. We had to kind of do a lot of trial and error. So I'm going to share a little bit about that with you today. I'm really passionate about the work that we do. I could probably talk all day, but no one wants to hear that. So I'm not going to be able to address everything I want to address, but hopefully we'll all get to see each other again as part of the Compassion and Choices collaborative group that Angela has started, because I'm really excited to start working with that group as well. So while I did have the experience in working in organ and tissue recovery, and in that experience, I saw professionally spending about 10+ years in ICUs. Obviously, the patients that we were working with were patients that had maybe had strokes or had some kind of head trauma, because you need to be brain dead. Well, not anymore, but generally you're looking at a brain death diagnosis for organ recovery. I was able to observe, sitting in an ICU, and I'm going to put these in quotes, the good deaths, the bad deaths, family dynamics. And it got to the point where at the end of my career, you could almost kind of see which families had end of life conversations and which families had not had end of life conversations, in how on how they interacted with the staff, on how they interacted with our staff, and the experience ultimately for the patient. And one of the things that I saw that really brought it home to me was that the patients and families that had had end of life conversations, I won't say it was easier, because obviously in the patient population that I was dealing with, this was the worst day of their life. It was a sudden and tragic death. But when you looked overall, you could see the families that had had conversations. There was a general amount of greater peace and understanding, and very much focused on what was in the best interest of the patient, and not necessarily being in such obviously they were in a trauma position, but they were able to differentiate that between doing what they wanted to do with their families. Before I worked in organ and tissue recovery, I had spent about 2 years being the caregiver for both of my parents. I was, as I like to say, a delightful midlife surprise. So my parents were a bit older and in their mid-40s when I was born, which was unusual back in the day. And so I was a young caregiver. I was in my 30s, and my mother was living with COPD. One day, my father, who had just kind of not been feeling great, but like he said to me, I'm 76, how great am I going to feel, you know, on an everyday basis? I'm not going to feel like I did when I was 40. He turned yellow one day, and down we went the path of him having a pancreatic cancer diagnosis. And back at the beginning of the 2000s, there was really not a whole lot of information out there. It was a death sentence. There weren't a lot of resources. I found one forum online that I dove heavily into because I had to do a baptism by fire. I had to learn about pancreatic cancer. I had to learn about the treatments. I had to learn about end of life, and what to look for, and what was normal and what was not normal. And I'm a kind of a student by nature, so I did all of that. And I learned a lot, and my father and I were fortunate enough to have an amazing year together. I'm sorry, I'm going to get a little emotional. And then my dad died, and then less than 1 year, 1 week shy of his 1 year anniversary of his death, my mother died. And she had been living with COPD for a while. So I felt that I kind of had a professional experience and a personal experience, and not that it was ever easy to be in the death and dying or end of life space, but I felt so many people shy away from it, and I had the ability to help hopefully communicate and to help people understand it better, and maybe be a little bit more comfortable in the space and destigmatize some of the misunderstandings, that when I got the chance to work with Lisa, it just seemed like a natural fit. So this little monkey right here in the lower right corner is that's my little beagle, Nora. So I thought today, and Marilyn and I discussed this, I would focus on a few things. So as she mentioned, I very much have a forward motion mindset. If you spend enough time working in the nonprofit sector, you don't have an option. You basically are trying to do big work, a lot of work, with very little resources, very little money. So you have to be creative, and you have to be a jack of all trades and maybe a master of some. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what that's meant for me and how I've kind of adopted that philosophy in my career. And then I thought I would talk about embracing challenges as opportunities, which kind of goes a little bit along with the forward motion mindset. And
my speaker is not working on my
should I stop? Can everyone else hear me?
I can hear you, Molly.
Okay. And then third, I'm going to give you a little snapshot of how we're kind of growing our community of support in a digital world. And we've had to do that because we live in Ohio. Ohio has 11 million people. We have 88 counties. It can be a 6 to 8 hour drive across the state. I've also had the pleasure of driving through Iowa, which is a very long state. And I've had the pleasure of meeting some of your state highway patrol folks along that drive, and they have been so nice. So when you said be Iowa nice, I was like, totally. I've never been picked up and gotten a ticket by someone so friendly in my life, who's petting my dog and everything. So my sister lives in Omaha, Nebraska, so I make the drive through Iowa on a fairly regular basis. So I'm going to talk about it because it's really a necessity, because one of the things we don't have is we don't have a lot of resources, we don't have a lot of money, and there's so many things you can do from a social media perspective and digitally to be able to help grow your community of support. So this little picture here on the right, I just want to point out these folks. This is lovely. These are some of the things that happen when you just put it out into the world that you're doing this work, and these are the folks that find you. The woman on the right, her father actually used Oregon's Death with Dignity law, and she heard about us through social media. Somebody on her social media shared one of our posts. She came, started doing research, found us, and we're doing a campaign called Voices Across Ohio, We've got 3 signs printed up, and we're going and we're asking people to pick a message that resonates with them, because what we really, really wanted to do in Ohio was to show that these are real people behind this issue. It's not just a small group of us that really want to see a law passed and improve end-of-life options in Ohio. It's a lot of Ohioans. We did a survey in 2018, and we found what they kind of find nationally, which is about 7 out of 10 people are going to support your issue, even if it's not something that they would necessarily do for themselves. So Sherry and Jim have been wonderful and have really stepped up to the table. And I'm actually heading down in a few weeks to meet her mother, who is still alive and living in a nursing home and very much wants to share her story about their experience with medical aid and dying in Oregon. So what is that forward motion mindset? I don't know how many folks in here have come from either a nonprofit background. I know, Steve, you mentioned that you're a physician. Everywhere you've probably ever worked in your life, you've had some goals. What are things that this business or this company or my work personally am I going to do? And how am I going to measure what that looks like? And because you can't do everything, you just can't. And especially when we're all working with large volunteer groups, everyone is doing this out of the goodness of their heart, but they're also bringing a level of expertise because everyone's got something that they're bringing to the table. So when we sat down in Ohio, and we function as kind of an independent organization, we work with Compassion and Choices, but we kind of operate individually. So we're not technically a chapter. So I do think it's important to make that distinction in the work that you guys are doing versus the work that we're doing. So we know in Ohio, we are a very heavily gerrymandered state, for those of you who do not know. We are actually one of the most gerrymandered states in the country, which is not a badge of honor, but it's something important for you to know, because these are the struggles that we are up against. You hear us sometimes you will hear about Ohio in the news. Again, not something we want people to hear, but here we are. This November, but we have successfully passed reproductive rights ballot initiatives. We've successfully passed an initiative where the majority party tried to change the, oh gosh, what is the phrase I'm doing? The threshold, if you will, for being able to pass a ballot initiative. Before our reproductive rights initiative came forward, the majority party tried to pass an initiative where you had to have 60% instead of a pure majority. Ohioans said, not going to happen. So we are red, but we are a little bit purple. So we're kind of weird and a little schizophrenic and kind of a little bit all over the place, but we are heavily gerrymandered. So right now, our legislative majority in Columbus is a very far right Republican majority. We're hoping that this November, what will happen is that we are put forth a gerrymandering and anti-gerrymandering agenda that will then take district drawing out of the hands of politicians and put it into the hands of citizens. So that's one of the things that we're working on. And thankfully, the former Republican head of our Ohio Supreme Court is leading that initiative. And we just got confirmation that we have met all the requirements for signatures. So that will be going on the ballot in November. And then our hope as an organization is then over the next, 2 to 4 years, however, when the cycles go, that we will start to see a more balanced state house. But that being said, just because our state house is gerrymandered and fairly unbalanced doesn't mean we don't work with our state house. We still go down, we still have meetings, we still ask our constituents to schedule meetings with their legislators, because one of the things that we have found out is that most of the information that folks have at least in our capital is incorrect and is being, they mostly have the framework of what the opposition has been talking about, and they don't really have the facts about medical aid and dying. So we are very much in the education and awareness phase in both our legislative work and then also in our public work as well. So we said passing a law right now or putting legislation forward right now is not going to work. It's just not going to work, because we would not be able to get bipartisan support, which is one of the things that our policy committee and our board decided that we needed to have before we put forth legislation. So we had to go, okay, how are we going to set these goals? So we decided, how many people can we educate annually? How many people in the public can we reach out to? How many people in healthcare can we reach out to? How do we start building our coalition so when that window opens, we are fully positioned with a strong community of support behind us to move forward? So the other part of that is there's no failures. You have to give yourself permission to fail. when I worked in organ and tissue recovery, we used to do something called the Breakthrough Collaboratives. It was a national program, and they encouraged, and that's kind of where I learned to encourage failures, because until you try something, you don't know if it's going to work. And we are still an issue that is somewhat in its infancy, even though I use that term kind of in quotes. We have been doing things the same way for a long time in our issue space. And I'm starting to see now that we're going, okay, we've been doing that and it hasn't necessarily been working. What other ways can we look at and try to see if we can't move the issue forward? Even if it's not necessarily passing a law, how do we move things forward and getting creative? And then being nimble and fearless. And that's easier said than done, obviously. So I had to do this because when I was working in my previous 2 social issues, there was a lot of pushback. You know, when I first started working in hunger insecurity, the overall philosophy was, well, if they would just get a job, they'd have enough food to eat, and it's their problem that they're hungry. And we now know that that's not true. I knew that wasn't true back then, but I had to find a way to be able to communicate that to a group of people, to make them to understand that it's not always just black and white. There are many, many shades of gray. And sometimes that means going into hostile situations, and I've used hostile in quotes, obviously, but into situations where people have been fed information that is incorrect, that you have to correct, but you have to be able to correct that information in a way that they're willing to receive it. And then the other thing for part of the forward motion mindset is to seek out feedback from all walks of life. Everything isn't about me walking into a room telling them what I think they ought to know and how they ought to know it and my understanding of it. It's going and saying, what is your understanding of this issue? What are your concerns? And that has been a really helpful tool in all of my work since I started in the nonprofit sector, because if you give somebody permission to tell you how they understand your issue, it then gives you an opportunity to know where that person is and to be able to communicate with them in a way that they're going to be able to receive your message. So embracing challenges as opportunities. So this is probably a little bit of my quirky personality. I'm the one that you call when things are going horribly south, because I love to problem solve. So if you're ever arrested at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm your girl. And that was one of the things too, when I worked in organ and tissue recovery, if something was heading south at the hospital, they'd call me. I like to problem solve. It's what I like to do, but I recognize not everybody likes to do that. And finding people and having people as part of your organization that do like to do that can really be a great addition, because Lisa is not, the woman that I work with is not a big fan of doing those kinds of things. And so she kind of lets me go into the more challenging situations, which frankly I enjoy, because usually if somebody is telling me they don't like it, they don't like this, it's usually not malicious. It's usually that they just don't really understand what the issue is about. So I love being able to figure out how to meet them where they are and be able to communicate with them. So I figured you guys probably share some of the same problems in Ohio that we have here, which is people power. How do we grow that community of support across Iowa? How do we recruit more volunteers? How do we build these coalitions? And I'll be honest with you, we're still kind of fumbling our way through this, but at the same time, that goes back to don't be afraid to fail. Ask people what you can do, ask how they want to be communicated with, find out what their concerns are, and just listen. Budget. How do we, one of the big things we've run to is, well, how do you ask for money when you're not close to passing a law? Because sometimes people will say to us, well, it's Ohio, that's never going to happen. Well, one of the things we made the decision of as an organization was that we were never going to say, if we pass a law, we were always use the language, when we pass a law will pass eventually. I may not be around for it. Lisa may not be around for it. I'd like to think I'm going to be around for it. That's just the approach that we take. So how do we ask for money? Because what we have to make people understand, and I don't know if you, I think you guys mentioned before that you necessarily don't do a lot of fundraising. We have to do fundraising. So how do we ask for that? Because we have to make people understand the larger picture. We have to get them to understand that we need a balanced state house, that if we're going to do a ballot initiative, that's going to be a very expensive adventure. We have to show them that we are good stewards of their funds. We have to show them that we are authentic, we are transparent, we are honest, and that the money that they are donating to this cause, be it through our 501c3 for education and awareness, or a 501c4 for political work, is going to be well spent, and we are going to be good stewards of their money. And then tracking monetary donations. So like we've made a decision, Lisa does all of the large donors. She does, and when I say large donors, that means anything over $500. I don't want you to get fancy and think we're sitting here on big dollars, because we're not. But anything over 500, those are the folks that Lisa works with one-on-one and helps to cultivate them going forward. We're making sure we're always thanking people. We're cultivating the donors, because we know that once they're under the tent with us, they're engaged in the issue. They know that we are good, solid, authentic people who are going to use their funds wisely. As time goes on and we continue to build momentum in Ohio, that we hope that those folks will step up and continue to support us, whether on a recurring basis, well, they will continue to increase their donations. So Lisa does a lot of our donor cultivation piece. My specialty and where I love to study is in messaging. And so what type of messaging works for our state, works for Iowa? I don't know if you all have had this conversation. When I first started working with Lisa, we were very scattered, to say it the best. We were still using every other term and this and that, and it was very unclear. And I can see where members of the public were like, so is it death with dignity? Is it medical aid and dying? Is it end of life? What are you talking about? Like, I don't even know what you're talking about. In Ohio, personally, we found out that the phrase death with dignity does not work in Ohio. It feeds an opposition messaging immediately. So we do not refer to medical aid and dying as death with dignity in any way. We refer to it as medical aid and dying, and we may use assisted dying just because medical aid and dying gets to be very wordy if you're constantly talking and having to say medical aid and dying. So that's something that you have to consider, because we are in a state that requires strong bipartisan support. And we know that organized opposition is funding some of the folks that are currently occupying our state house. So one of the things I just noticed anecdotally, like when I came into the issue overall, was that there was a lot of us being on our back foot. And when I say we, I mean collectively we, where we were not positioning the issue in the way that it should be positioned. And we were always kind of on our back foot and kind of talking about how controversial it was. And we know it's hard to talk about. And we were giving people excuses to not talk about our issue. So it's been a challenge, and it's still an ongoing discussion and an ongoing responsibility for us to test out different language and to make sure that we're training our volunteers to use the same language, make sure that our board is always speaking the same language. Because one of the things I noticed, and I don't know if you noticed this on the first slide, but I did spend 2 years doing social media for Death with Dignity National Center. And one of the things I really did was to watch how people responded to different language when I was out looking on social media, and people were having conversations about, you know, whether they called it death with dignity, or even if they called it assisted suicide or whatever. You know, obviously we don't use that phrase at all. And how were they reacting to the language? And how could we take some of the nuance that is so predominant in our issue and be able to streamline that and make it easier for people to understand what the end goal was, which is end of life autonomy. You saw probably in one of the signs that Sherry and Jim Carnahan were holding, is one of those was yes to freedom and compassion. And it was very interesting when we were doing we've done our first round of photo campaigns, and we found that the healthcare folks were very much drawn to that message. And the folks that were more part of legislatively focused, they were more focused on, as an Ohio voter, I support medical aid and dying. And then the folks, a lot of them who had maybe a personal experience or who were living with a life-limiting or terminal illness, very much gravitated towards my life, my death, my decision. So we have to always be considering who our audience is. I don't talk to healthcare providers the same way that I talk to a public audience, because they have different interests. But sometimes it's about asking them, what do you want more information on? And college students, I'd love to do college students, because I wish we could just get them to be the predominant voters, because these kids are like, I don't understand why you would do this anyway. Like, why would you let somebody suffer at the end of their lives? That just doesn't even seem right. And who's going to tell me how I can die or not die? I'm like, well, you know, then we need you to be on board. And that has really helped us engage college students as well. So all of this background work that we do with the messaging and really figuring out in a very planned and thoughtful way how we're going to communicate has helped us be able to be clearer on how we're going to communicate with folks once we get out into, as I call it, the digital space. Now, I'm going to talk mostly about social media, but the digital space can be, it can be Google Ads, it can be anything you want it to be. It can even be going out. And so, for example, every morning, and I don't know if anybody here does this, but every morning I have Google alerts set for certain key phrases. And I will go out and look at my emails every morning, and I will look at key phrases that I'm tracking to see where in the news they're coming from. And is there an opportunity for me to respond? And if there is, I have taken the time just by doing this a lot. And I have certain paragraphs that I know I can copy and paste so that I make sure that if there is an opposition article out there, and just anecdotally, I will tell you that it's about a 7-to-1 ratio of opposition articles to support articles. So if you are a writer or if you are someone, we're always trying to encourage our folks. We need you to get out there and to advocate for this issue in the public space and write about it from your level, from your area of expertise. So we do that. So I'm mostly going to focus on social media because that's one of the things that I've spent a lot of time doing it. Everything that we do at Ohio End of Life Options is based around 3 things: acquisition, engagement, and retention. That then will help us meet our goals. So when I say acquisition to us is anybody new that we have invited to be part of our issue and that they have taken us up on that invitation. We have a statewide petition of support that we use as an acquisition tool. It is on our website. We put it on our social media. We put it in our emails. And the petition tool is to say, we want, please join and be a voice in the largest public record of support for medical aid in dying law in Ohio. And that is what we have invited people to do. People sign on to that petition. They're automatically put into our database and into our email system. Then it's a matter of, okay, this person took, and we call that in the biz a low bar ask. We've asked you to sign a petition. That's a pretty easy thing to ask somebody to do. Then it's our job to figure out how are we going to engage this person. And everybody engages differently. So then it's my job to come out and say, okay, are you someone who only wants to show up at the State House when we have legislation put forward? Are you someone who wants to volunteer? Are you someone who's maybe homebound, but really likes to do administrative work? How can we get you some activities to do that are super helpful and things that we need if maybe you are homebound and not well all the time? So we test those out to see where we can get folks to engage. And then retention. There's always going to be people that are going to take yourselves off the list. And I had to learn this the hard way because, when you first start seeing people coming off your email list, you're like, oh my gosh, what are we doing wrong? And we need to have everybody on the email list. But people will do a lovely job of just saving you the time and energy of continuing to send them emails, and they will take themselves off your email list. And that's fine. If they signed the petition of support and now they've taken themselves off the email list because maybe they just don't want to get all the regular emails, our hope is that when we get close to presenting legislation or we're doing more publicly, that they will re-engage. But my job generally is to try to retain people because they are going to be the best ambassadors and they are going to be our helpers. No matter how they're doing it, they're going to be the helpers for us in helping to spread the word across the state. And everyone has a seat at the table. One of the things we had to decide in Ohio is that we were going to treat this not as a bipartisan issue, but as a human issue. And Lisa Schattinger does all of our policy work. So she's generally the one working with the lawmakers and doing the education with the lawmakers. So she has had to be in some situations where she has been with some folks that are very much opposed to the issue. And one of the things she says that kind of keeps her going and keeps her moving forward is that even when she leaves meetings like that, where she knows this person isn't going to be a sponsor or co-sponsor or whatever, they might not even vote for it. But she said, I always leave and they always say to me, wow, I actually didn't know that. And it's usually one thing like, I had no idea that it was this or that was this or that was this. So we have opened up their door a little bit, and we have at least given them information that is correct. And then a little something to chew on afterwards. And then hopefully as we continue to communicate with them, Maybe they will come on board, maybe they'll never come on board, and that's okay too. But at least they're making decisions and they have the information to make informed decisions. So branding is another big thing. You all are sitting in Clover. You've got Compassion and Choices branding, which is fantastic. They're known across the country. We have a lot of folks in Ohio that are also Compassion and Choices supporters and volunteers, which we love because they do such a great job of training their volunteers. So it makes it much nicer for us. And so there's opportunities to always build on that positive image. And then social media. So when I first started and somebody said, well, nobody's doing social media. And I said, well, here I go. I'll dive into the pool. Let me see what I can figure out. You know, I'm on social media, but I certainly didn't know how to necessarily operate a page or to optimize it. I had the luxury of just being able to have that learning curve a little bit. And mostly how I learned a lot of it was following people that I thought did a really great job and looking at their posts and seeing what worked. And I'm going to show you some of the folks that I follow now, and me realizing and being able to forgive myself that I didn't have to sit around and create brand new, unique content every time I put something on Facebook, and that I could take all of the resources that are out there in the end of life space and be able to educate people because I just didn't have the time or the resources to do a lot of original stuff, really gave me permission to share. It's as easy as that when I first started. Now I do a lot more unique stuff now, but not always. A lot of the times there's so many wonderful folks out there doing great job, whether it be programming, whether it be micro learning, that one of the things we realized, and I'm going to talk about this next, is that we could not, we could post one time a week with original content, or we could post daily by sharing information from other qualified people who do amazing jobs. And it still kept people engaged in our page, because we were not only giving them information about medical aid and dying, but we were giving them information about that was valuable to them in their lives outside of medical aid and dying. So when Lisa and I first started, we sat down and we had this very conversation. I said, we do not have enough content on medical aid and dying to talk about it for 365 days a year. It's not going to happen. So how are we going to give our supporters value and let them recognize us as the subject matter experts in, the end of life options and end of life, advanced care planning and things like that, that we can keep our followers engaged on our social media pages. So these are the things that we've come up with. And just anecdotally, I'd say the two outside of medical aid and dying, maybe the three that get the most interaction, and that can be like a like or a comment or a share, are going to be on grief, caregiving, and advanced care planning. Advanced care planning is incredibly overwhelming for people. So we've tried to take that and make it micro learning so that people aren't nearly as overwhelmed. Caregiving, as someone who was a young caregiver at a time when all of my friends were getting married and having babies, and here I am taking care of two terminally ill people, it was a very lonely space. We don't do a great job with caregiving support in the United States. We must do better with it. And these folks are sometimes really just desperate for a life raft and for somebody to understand what they're going through. So anytime I can find really helpful things on caregiving, I make sure that we try to share that with them. And grief is a universal thing that nobody tells you about until you're in the midst of it. And the one thing I always use for this story is that because my parents died sooner than most of my peers lost their friends, years after my parents died, I went to a friend's funeral. Her dad had died, and she came up to me specifically afterwards and said, Molly, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't know what kind of grief you were going through and what you were experiencing it, because it's a little bit like giving birth. You can explain it to somebody, but you kind of have to go through it to really, really, really get the idea of what it actually takes. And you can try to describe grief to people, but it manifests in so many different ways, and it's so unique. And that has always stuck with me, because I told her, I said, that's okay, because I didn't necessarily want you to have to be the member of this club that no one wants to join until you absolutely had to. But, we're glad to have you. We're glad to have you, but we're sorry we have to have you as well. So these are just a little smattering of some of the social media accounts that I followed when we first started. And this took me down the rabbit hole of a bunch of other people, but I couldn't possibly list them all. And I did see that you have a Compassion and Choices Iowa page. And I don't know how much interaction your actual team in Iowa is allowed to have for that. So I'm obviously speaking from the Ohio perspective. So we share a lot of information from these particular social media folks. And then these social media folks have then allowed me to find other people who have good content that we're able to share, so that again, it's not so overwhelming for anybody on your team who has to do the social media, because so much great content is already out there that you can share a lot of great stuff and ask a question at the top of it. So for example, when Compassion and Choices shares something about maybe state legislation from another state that doesn't have anything to do with Ohio, I will put out something on our social media page that says, hey, if you have family or friends in New York or Delaware or wherever it happens to be, please share this with them so that they can get engaged in their state, because everybody's living all over the place. You don't know who knows who where, but it gives me a chance to put up a post from people that are already doing the work. I don't have to create anything. I can just put a little line. Conversation Project's another one. They do a great job of just giving you little bits of micro learning. So I might just share something from the Conversation Project and might just add one question at the top. What would you add to this list of suggestions from the Conversation Project? Sometimes you get engagement, sometimes you don't. Hospice Nurse Julie, I don't know if anyone follows Hospice Nurse Julie. She is literally one of my favorite people, because she also does wonderful videos where she helps people understand what the end of life looks like in very small, bite-sized, manageable pieces. And it's a wonderful way to just quietly let somebody be like, oh, okay, so that's what terminal lucidity is. I never knew what that was. Or, oh, I didn't know that was normal at the end of life. Because everything is giving people comfort and value and destigmatizing a lot of the things. And there's so much wonderful content out there from people that are doing this work. We also follow every hospice in Ohio. Every hospice in Ohio, if they have, now we don't share their fundraisers because we have to do fundraising on our own, but any kind of other events that they're doing, or if they're doing something remarkable, we want to make sure that we share that with them, because we want them to know we support the work that you're doing. So when the time comes and we pass our legislation and we're going to be outreaching and working with hospices, that we can, that they know who we are and we know who they are. And all the statewide MAID organizations, all of the state organizations. And once you start kind of looking around for some of these, the state organizations will come up. You know, you can follow Ohio End of Life Options, and then odds are most of the other states will come up. And they can be great resources as well, because sometimes they're doing really cool and innovative programming. We just did a program the other night where we brought in folks from Oregon and Vermont, because they're getting a lot of phone calls from the Midwest. I don't know if you guys have had this conversation with them, but we've gotten a lot of phone calls. They said, we're getting a lot of phone calls from the Midwest. We're getting a lot of phone calls from Ohio, people who want to go to Vermont. And we decided to bring them in so that people could really understand. So we did a statewide virtual event where people could come, and we had 2 experts from Oregon and Vermont talk about what it takes for an Ohioan to go access laws in those states. And at the end of that, the overwhelming conclusion was, oh my goodness, that's great in theory, but that's not always going to be a practical option for people in terms of, you know, you're terminally ill. Do you have the resources? It can be expensive. It's an accessibility issue. And at that point, we said, this is why we need to have a law in Ohio. And I'm happy to report that after that meeting, and this was such a delightful, wonderful surprise, we got a $2,500 donation to our 501c4 from someone who attended the program and said, I live in California, so I'm going to have access to the law. My family lives in Ohio. You know, thank you for doing this work, and for everybody, and for getting people to realize that it's going to be more important to have the law in their own state than to try to count on having to go elsewhere.
Molly?
Yeah, am I ready to
break in?
Yeah.
Yeah, we should kind of be wrapping up.
Okay.
So I have a little time.
Yeah. Okay. So here's just some of our social media stuff, and to kind of show you just the supporters. And we do Facebook and Instagram, and you can just kind of see the demographics for those folks. Obviously, you want to capture both because you have a little younger skew on Facebook and Instagram. And then we talk about reach too. Yeah, we have 11 million people in our state. The reach for Instagram is 35,000. Might not seem like a lot, but if we weren't doing anything, it would be 0. And one of the things that we always did, and this is my last slide, one of the things we've always done is that, and when I used to do the collaborative work was anytime we left a conference, the question was, what are you going to do by next Tuesday? So I thought I'd kind of set the scene for you for the rest of the day. And what is one action that I can take before September 1st to help grow the medical aid and dying movement in Iowa? So as I hope that you're going through the rest of the day, that you will give that some thought. And thank you very much for having me. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Feel free to jump in. Does anyone have any questions for Molly at this point?
I'd like to ask a question. How many active core volunteers do you have in your organization?
I bet you our volunteer corps is probably smaller than yours. We only have about 30 core volunteers. We decided we had to make a decision that we wanted to create the structure of the organization, and then we were going to build our volunteer program around that. Lisa and I did that together just because of the experience that I had. Now we're really starting to do a lot more outreach and to grow our volunteers, because now we feel like we have enough of a structure to actually make the ask of things that need to be done. And most of the work that the community volunteers are doing right now is either they are coming with us to do constituent meetings with lawmakers, or they're doing community outreach where we will have them do petition drives. And they will also integrate into that the Voices Across Ohio photo campaign. So if they have an information table in their community, we give them information. They have the option to get their picture taken and to join the Voices Across Ohio campaign. Mm-hmm. So it's very, very mellow and just kind of very informational and awareness.
Hillary?
Molly, thank you so much. I'm curious, you have both a 501c3 and a 501c4, and you have paid staff too?
Yeah. When I first started, and my husband always laughs about this because I came home to him and I said, I think I'm going to take a year off and help this woman get her nonprofit up and running. To which he said, okay, you know, he's used to this with me. He's been doing my nonprofit ride with me for, you know, ever since we met. So he's like, okay. So I ended up doing it as an unpaid person for probably 5+ years. I'm now a part-time contractor with a stipend. But our executive director does not receive a salary. And then we have a part-time admin who just works hourly for like 10 hours a week when we need her.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Molly, what are some of the things you've done to engage a younger audience? Quite frankly, we haven't really tapped into that market very much in Iowa.
Yeah. Colleges have been wonderful. Nursing schools, social work programs. I will tell you, if I was going to give you any advice, if you want to start really tipping off, social work programs, nursing programs, sometimes medical school programs, depending if they're open to that. Social workers have been one of our biggest supporters. Death doulas have been another big group, because they do tend to be, and when I say younger, I'm not talking we're going to get, you know, high school seniors or anything. Usually folks are in college or above, but we're happy if we have a group that's maybe, you know, late 20s, early 30s. That's kind of what we consider young. I don't know what everybody else considers young, but that's kind of what we consider young. And that's kind of where we tend to bring those folks. And usually with the colleges, I will tell you, they will usually engage more. We kind of plant the seed when we go and talk to them about the issue in at their universities or colleges. But when they start working is usually when they will usually start to re-engage, because then they're on the front lines and they're kind of seeing how things actually work in end of life and healthcare, and they will usually hop on board. And social workers have been one of our biggest groups. Most states probably have an NASW chapter, National Association of Social Workers. They have been amazing, and we're actually working with them to do a statewide webinar for all of their social workers on just helping them to understand how to communicate with people about medical aid and dying, letting them know it's not an option in Ohio. Here's what it means. Here's what it doesn't. Here's where you can travel to, and then referring to us as a resource if they want more information.
Thank you.
Sure. Anyone else? Great.
Craig?
Well,
We
Craig
have
has
one
his hand raised.
question. Craig?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, as a social worker and retired teacher, social work programs are always looking for good practicum placements. and there's your unpaid staff.
Yes.
A practicum student will work for a whole semester, sometimes the whole year for free.
Yeah.
If you provide a social worker to supervise them, and they can do dynamite work in this space. And we have some at the senior center here in Iowa City. And that's a great placement for them. So check.
Yeah. Cannot say enough about social workers. Even when I worked in organ and tissue recovery, it was the social workers that were working with the families, talking with the families. If there was stuff happening and things were going down, or even things were going south, you always called the social worker. They just have a skill set that really lends itself to this kind of work. Yeah. Somebody just typed a question. Molly, after this, oops, I'm gonna go look at the chat. Molly, after this program, could you please let the Iowa group know who your contacts were in Vermont and Oregon? Yes, absolutely. I would love to. Yes, they did a beautiful job. I'm actually hoping that they'll do one for all the state organizations nationally. We decided to kind of try it. I said, you can come and test it out in Ohio and see how it goes. And it was, I learned things I didn't even know. So it was wonderful. I'll be happy to share those names with you. I'm sure they'd be happy to work with you.
Well, terrific. Molly, thank you so much. We will be following up with on many of the ideas and suggestions you have. You've given us a wealth of ideas. So
I know I gave you a lot, but I thanks so much. We all have to stick in this together. So we're right here with you in Ohio. So between all of us, we'll make the Midwest happen. It's all.
Yeah, well, you're lucky you have the ballot initiative in Ohio. We don't have that opportunity.
We don't have the money for it, so we'll get there. Have a great rest of your conference. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Molly.
Well, thank you, Molly. Thank you, Molly. We're grateful for sharing your insights and work on behalf of Compassionate Choices in Ohio. I know I've taken a page full of notes and was taking photographs of your slides. Motivation, persistence, and diligence are required for each of us working for personal autonomy at the end of life. And I want to apologize for my poor internet connection. I hope it holds together. Otherwise, I might go out and come back in and see if I get a better signal. But now we're gonna, I encourage you to listen to our first storyteller this morning, State Senator Nate Bolton. Take it away, Angela.
I'm Nate Bolton. I'm a state senator. I was first elected to the Iowa Senate in 2016. I represent East Des Moines, Altoona, South Ankeny, Pleasant Hill, the kind of eastern areas of Polk County here in the Des Moines metro area. As an attorney, I serve on the Judiciary Committee. I'm the ranking member of that committee. I'm also involved in leadership as the Senate's Democratic whip. And you know, something that happened in recent years, as my mother went through a cancer diagnosis and regimen of care and treatment, and then ultimately to the point where the treatment turned into palliative care, she pulled me aside this past year and mentioned the importance of dying with dignity. And the fact that Iowa does not have the opportunity for individuals with terminal illness to be able to make their own decisions on their own terms in those late stages. It's something that as she has gone through her battle with cancer, which we are so proud of her and grateful for what she's been able to do. Over 20 years ago, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And has dealt very aggressively with her diagnoses, but unfortunately, in the last 3 years, cancer has become a bigger and bigger part of her life as it has spread through her body. But she went through the process with her mother, my grandmother, of watching those late stages turn from care into, frankly, waiting for an undignified death. And a very painful death, and putting not only my grandmother through that, but our extended family through that period of time. And she didn't want to see us as her family members go through that, but also importantly, no one should have to go through that. And so the first time she has ever asked me to introduce a bill or do something about legislation was this. And there was no hesitation from me to be able to introduce a bill to do this and make this something for Iowans to consider as the right thing to do for people with terminal illness, and address their concerns of the ones that they love. So we introduced the bill. I was able to get a copy of the actual introduced copy of that legislation to her as she was going through home hospice recently. And there's a sense of pride in that she's making a difference in this. We weren't able to get the bill passed, obviously, but we are beginning new conversations on this topic in Iowa, and hopefully someday this legislation, this topic leads to a much better place.
We're grateful for Senator Bolton and the impetus of his mother to file Senate File 2101, the Our Care, Our Options bill earlier this year. Thank you, Senator Bolton, and we look forward to your continued support. In keeping with the legislative segment of our annual meeting, I'm pleased to introduce our legislative advocates in the Iowa legislature. Representative Sue Cahill is from Marshalltown, House District 52. She has a BA in Communications from Benedictine College and a BA in Education from Buena Vista University. She received her master's in education from Graceland University. She was a teacher in Marshalltown and served on its city council. A mother to 6 sons, Sue has served 2 terms in the Iowa House. Representative Cahill filed the Our Care, Our Options bill in the House this previous legislative session. Senator Janice Weiner from Iowa City represents Iowa Senate District 45 and is serving in her first term. She received her bachelor's from Princeton University and her law degree from Stanford. Janice joined the U.S. State Department in 1987 and has served in many postings, including Turkey, where she adopted her older daughter, and Poland, where she adopted her younger daughter. In Dusseldorf, Germany, Janice served as Consul General. She has served on the Iowa City Council and has served as board president of her synagogue. We are fortunate to have these dedicated public officials working on our behalf. I welcome them to offer their thoughts about their legislative work, the election, and the session yet to come. Representative Cahill, please share your thoughts.
Thank you very much, Steve. I became involved with this initiative a couple of years ago when Mary Masher, one of our representatives from Iowa City, brought me to one of these sessions just like you're having today. And it really resonated with me because about that same time, my mother was having healthcare issues. Her issues were heart issues, and she had been preparing herself for her ultimate death for a long time. And at her funeral, we joked she had this blue folder, and my mother could write more words on a page because of her small handwriting, but she had everything spelled out concerning her death process, where her important papers were, down to what songs she wanted at her funeral. She was very meticulous. She knew that she had 5 children. I'm one of 5, and she made sure we all knew where this folder was and what she wanted. She turned 90 in 2 years ago, and we had a great party for her in November, and she was still doing very well. But in January, her health took a turn, and it was a hard process. Even though she was prepared for all aspects of her death, we had her moved into it wasn't really a hospice, but it was a higher level care than her assisted living care that she had been at. And bless her heart, she was in a new situation. We were spending, 24/7 with her. And the line that hits me, it was in the middle of the night on probably the third or fourth night that I had sat up with her, is she said, "Why does it have to be so hard?" Because she was just in a state of agitation. She couldn't get comfortable. She, and her words to me of, "Why does it have to be so hard?" As we sat there and I supported her on the bed to try and help her, move her to a chair to get her comfortable. Again, she was prepared for every aspect of her death except the actual dying part. So this program, the Compassion and Choices, and the bill that was introduced last year, I think would have given her that option to say, it doesn't have to be this hard. She knew that it was coming. And again, she wanted that dignity, and she had prepared for it in so many ways, except those final days. And love my mother. And, we all told her, "It's all right, Mom, you can do this now." And I think this program would have saved her maybe 3 or 4 days of pain, discomfort, agitation, and it would have been a more dignified death without that pain and the difficulties that she experienced. So that's why I became involved with this movement and introduced the bill on the House side. And we will continue to work toward that so that other people, it doesn't have to be that hard, that we do have options that we can use to make our lives better from beginning to the very end. So thank you, Steve, for having me today. And again, I appreciate the work you all do.
Thank you so much, Sue. I'm just reflecting on Sue and Molly's comments, and I'm thinking that I'm guessing there are all kinds of stories across our state where people have had someone in their family, a loved one, a friend, who's gone through a dying process that was really quite challenging for them. So, Sue, thank you for your work. I'll now ask Senator Weiner to share her thoughts and observations.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Sue, and thank you all for having me on this morning. I think you're right, Steve. I think the stories are there. The question is how we get to them. What you're all doing is really, it seems like it's always the mothers. It was my mother who instilled this value in me years ago, probably decades ago, because compassion and caring are values that give people agency, and Iowans are independent people who want their agency. People deserve agency, especially at a time when they've been robbed by cancer, which is all too prevalent in Iowa, or some other disease, of so much of that agency. And I believe, as we're seeing on the campaign trail right now, that that kindness and compassion and caring, the work of our neighbors, remain core Iowa values. We see it in gestures small and large from Iowans all the time. If you just think about the reaction to all the flooding this summer and how people who weren't even just neighbors, people from across the state, stepped up to help. And I too, I also know what it's like to watch a parent be diminished and no longer be the person they were and wish that they had had options. You heard Senator Bolton, you heard Representative Cahill. I think that everybody has a story. There's somebody they know, there's someone they love, and there's someone who they know who is or has been a caregiver, or they have themselves been a caregiver. So I think it's really up to all of us, up to all of you and all your multiplied networks to get to know your elected representatives, to listen to them. That's something that Molly talked about. To ask the questions that elicit the stories that you need to hear so that you can start to build common ground. It's how we built out a coalition to try and start improving mental health in the state. That wasn't always the case, and maybe we haven't made great progress, but there is a coalition from the most conservative Republicans to the most liberal Democrats that we need to improve mental health care. I'm convinced that we can do the same with this. So with patience and determination, we can all tap into those stories, we can educate, and we can build a coalition of caring and compassion. I appreciate you all for having me on. I appreciate your work. I don't know if Senator Bolton intends to introduce the bill on the Senate side this coming January. If he does not, I will, along with Representative Cahill. So thank you all for all the work you're doing and continue to do.
Thank you both for giving your time and support for the work of Compassion and Choices. We are ever grateful for your public service, and thank you for joining the annual meeting. We will spend a few minutes to inform you about the activities of the working groups for Iowa Compassion and Choices. Denise Chevalier will present the work of the Legislative Advocacy Work Group, or as we refer to it, the LAW. Denise is one of the tribe leaders of the Johnson County Action Team, in addition to her work on the Legislative Advocacy Work Group. Good morning, Denise.
Good morning. Hello, excuse me. Hello, volunteers and supporters and the curious. I'm happy to give you a brief rundown of one of our two work groups, Legislative Advocacy. The goal of the group is to foster and extend legislative support for the work of Iowa Compassion and Choices. We especially focus on extending the opportunity for terminally ill Iowans with a prognosis of 6 months or less to be able to request and receive medication that will allow for a peaceful death. These are some of the objectives of the law participants. We file bills in the Iowa House and Senate that represent the latest iterations of national compassion and choices. The Our Care, Our Options bills were filed in the past biennial sessions, as you heard. We will work with our legislative advocates and bill sponsors to file the latest iteration of the Our Care, Our Options bills in 2025. Given that this is an election year, we worked with volunteers to add support for medical aid in dying to the Democratic state platform. This started at the precinct level, then the county, and ultimately the state convention. We continue to reach out to legislators and physicians to gain support and understanding for the medical aid in dying. However, our work needs to be extended to Republicans. They are in control of the legislative chambers, which means they control the bills that are filed, debated, and voted upon. And we want and need bipartisan support. We want it to reflect what nationalized polls reflect, that the majority of Americans believe medical aid in dying should be an end-of-life option. We utilize national compassion and choices to educate volunteers on how to lobby their legislative representatives. This virtual session is offered monthly, and we are happy to arrange for volunteers to view the material. After the election, we will be asking volunteers to contact legislators, asking for support of the new medical aid in dying bill. We know that once made legislation is passed in a jurisdiction, the work is still just beginning. Ongoing education and of the public is a must. and challenges to the law are continually facing the legal team at National Compassion and Choices. Well, I hope you're wondering, if I want to be a part of the movement to have medical aid and dying option available in Iowa, how can I help? If I, specifically speaking of your representation in Congress, it's about engagement and education. Get to know your legislators. Find out what issues they are passionate about. Follow their votes on issues that matter to you. Phone calls, emails, and letters are important. Attend events where the legislators will be present. Campaign seasons are times when volunteers can attend political gatherings where candidates can be asked about their support for medical aid and dying. As you speak with your legislator at the ask to speak with your legislator at the Capitol when the legislature convenes, or set up a virtual lobby visit if your legislator is willing. Educate your representative on medical aid and dying. The National Compassion and Choices website offers an abundance of information to help you. Once the bills are filed in 2025 legislature, contact your legislators and tell them that the House file and Senate file are important to you and you would like their support. We will alert volunteers of the assigned file numbers that you would refer to. Specific to medical aid and dying, the Compassion and Choices website has an automated system you can use to write to your representative. Just add your personal note and submit it. And finally, I have a very important ask from the Legislative Advocacy Work Group. Steve and I could use more volunteers. We meet virtually once a month for 1 hour, divide up our tasks, and stay in touch via email. We ask that you join us as we seek to expand statewide our network of volunteers and supporters. There are 150 legislators, and 2 people are not enough to spread our message and secure the support necessary for medical aid and dying to become available to Iowans. Let's remember this. We are stronger together, and I ask you to join us. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. I would be remiss if I didn't extend an invitation for volunteers to join either of the Iowa Compassion and Choices work groups. To lighten the mood, I'll now ask Susan Fabish to tell us about the trivia contest process and prize. Good morning, Sue.
Steve, I don't know that she is on, and she just emailed me. I think she might have the wrong date.
Okay, Marilyn, do you have anything you want to share about the trivia contest?
Oh, you're on mute, Marilyn.
We decided to have a little fun in this meeting instead of just talking about death and medical aid and dying and so forth. So what we decided to do was have a trivia contest, but use some data for the contest from that Compassion and Choices has compiled. So we are going to throughout ask you a couple of questions, and we have this program that will tabulate the results. And the big enticement, the winner is going to receive Caitlin Clark's book called Unmatched. And yes, Dave is holding that up. And it's a really wonderful coffee table book. And so I think, you know, if you're the winner, you will enjoy that book very much. So we will have throughout the rest of the meeting a couple of questions. So are you ready for the questions? Angela?
I think so. Let's give it a go.
Go ahead and proceed, and we need some background music for this, but
Can you see the questions?
yes.
Okay.
So they should just hit the circle that with the correct answer, correct?
Yes, if that's how it looks different on my end. So
Okay.
I'm just seeing the results.
Oh, okay.
So
I'm just gonna, I'm just gonna check this. Yeah, you will just hit the circle with the correct answer or what you think is the correct answer, answer both questions, and then hit the blue button at the bottom that says submit. And we'll give you a few minutes for this. Just don't worry about it. Just hop on if you can. Okay? Yep. Sure. Bye-bye.
So Sarah asked me if I can send it again because she hit it too soon. I am not able to resend the quiz, but
Okay.
Sarah, if you want to message me privately, I should just be, if you go down to the chat where it says to everyone and click compassion and choices and send me your answer and I can tally you into the larger one if anyone else missed it too. So the second question is, what percentage of self-identified Republicans believe a mentally sound adult with an incurable terminal illness who only has 6 months or less to live should have the legal option to obtain a prescription medication to pass peacefully in their sleep, known as medical aid in dying? And the answers could be 10%, 32%, 48%, or 68%. So Mary Ellen, you might have missed that one too. So again, if you just go to the chat and message me directly, I just got Sarah's there. So. Okay. Marilyn, are you ready for me to end this one? Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I think everybody has had a chance to submit their answers.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll move on then we'll have more questions, but we'll move on to the next part of the agenda.
Okay. Marion Schwabauer will be our next storyteller. Marion is an integral volunteer with the Johnson County Action Team. She has served in many capacities, including chairing the JCAT, being the first chair of the Community Education and Enhancement Work Group, and now also contributes to the newsletter. Marion, I look forward to your story.
Thank you, Steve. In October of 2010, my husband Ivan and I were asked to provide music for a friend's memorial service. Ivan had started playing his clarinet again, and when he retired, regularly performing with a swing band, and he occasionally played at church while I accompanied him on the piano or organ. But after the service, Ivan remarked that he hadn't been able to hold some of the notes as long as he needed to. He couldn't get enough breath. We were in our early 70s. We had had rewarding careers in public health and health sciences education. We were busy enjoying a new condominium, volunteering at a local thrift shop, and adding to our collections. We planned to visit friends, siblings, children, grandchildren across the United States, explore some more national parks, and skip shoveling snow during the winter while we bask in the sun of the Southwest. But something seemed amiss. In addition to Ivan's difficulty playing the clarinet, occasionally his speech was slurred. We made an appointment with our family physician, and then after multiple appointments with specialists, exploratory throat surgery, and extensive neurological testing in January of 2011, we had our answer: amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or ALS. I called ALS our intruder, as muscle death by muscle death, it took over our lives. One day, Ivan would be able to perform an action, the next day he couldn't. Simple everyday actions like picking up a pencil or turning a page could no longer be taken for granted. By June, it became clear that the trip we'd planned to visit Glacier National Park in July could not happen. Ivan had lost the use of so many muscles in his feet and hands that he could no longer drive. By July, hospice staff paid regular visits to assist him with the activities of daily living. We raced against the daily loss of muscle control and prepared to move to a retirement center with a healthcare unit that would be able to provide the care that Ivan would inevitably need, and very soon. Ivan's mind was still sharp as ever, devising new workarounds as the devastating disease picked up speed. When his ability to write disappeared, which really distressed him because he took great pride in his penmanship, he simply used the computer more. We purchased special silverware and tableware to help him feed himself, and we rented an array of adaptive devices, including a cough assist machine and a BiPAP machine. Each month, Ivan saw a speech therapist, a dietitian, nurse, social worker, physical therapist, and neurologist at the ALS clinic. He tried anything he thought might be helpful. Even so, we barely kept up with the amount of change between clinic visits. A chemist and a fix-it guy, Ivan could figure out and repair almost anything. He never met a tool he didn't like, but we knew that soon all his creative adaptations would not be enough to fix the muscle losses he was facing. So we made an appointment with our lawyer to update our wills, advance care directives, and designated powers of attorney. Keeping things in order and well cared for was how Ivan showed his love for his family. But ALS is a messy disease. Ivan indicated in his advanced care directives that he did not want a feeding tube or intravenous infusions. He did not want resuscitation, nor did he want to be on a respirator. For Ivan, life was not worth living anymore when he could no longer do the things he valued. Communicate with his family and friends, care for himself and others. So when we moved into our apartment at the retirement facility at the end of August, Ivan was still mobile, using a power chair and feeding himself. By mid-October, he needed to move to the facility's healthcare center for additional care. When it soon became impossible to even swallow liquids without choking, he chose to no longer eat or drink. The only alternative was a feeding tube, which he declined. Just a few years earlier, Ivan's mother had decided after a fall and hip surgery at the age of 96 that she had lived a full life and voluntarily stopped eating and drinking. Ivan chose to follow her example. He'd lost a lot of weight already because he was so limited in how and what he could eat. It would not take long. The week of Thanksgiving, our 5 children and their families came to celebrate the holiday and say their final goodbyes. We let Ivan know that we loved him, that we would miss him terribly, but that we would be okay. He was free to go. Early the next morning, Ivan took his last breath on his own, just as he had wished. In the years following Ivan's passing, I updated my advance directives. I had learned firsthand how important it is to know my options for the future, for end-of-life care, and to equip myself with the tools that would allow me to have the kind of final days I wanted. This became even more clear in July 2017, when I suddenly experienced severe abdominal cramping that triggered an ambulance ride to the emergency room. Several hours later, the medical student on duty told me that I almost certainly had stage 4 colon cancer. A tumor was partially blocking my ascending colon, and there appeared to be metastases in the liver, colon cancer's favorite target. A colonoscopy confirmed the emergency room diagnosis. Over the next year, I would complete 6 months of chemotherapy and undergo 2 surgeries to remove the tumor and what was left of the metastases. I expanded and indexed a notebook that I had begun after Ivan's death that provided my executor and my other children all the information they would need if I didn't make it. That project later morphed into an article for our retirement community's monthly newsletter, and then into a 6-session course, which a friend and I taught twice, on everything from downsizing to preparing advance directives and funeral planning. It's now been more than 7 years since that surprise visit to the emergency room. I'm currently considered cancer-free. I have my advance directives form filled out, and like Ivan, I don't want a feeding tube or respirator. I've informed my children and other family in writing that I wish to die as pain-free as possible in my own apartment with no heroic efforts to keep me alive when the time comes. I try to regularly review and update my information for my survivors. Having all these things in order helps me and them sleep much better at night. For me and for Ivan, the main driver in our end-of-life planning and decision-making has been responsibility. Just as we've tried to live responsibly, not using resources unnecessarily, thinking about how we can give to the world rather than what we can take from it, I want to die responsibly for myself, for my loved ones, for our society at large. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion, for sharing your story, and thank you for all the energy and enthusiasm that you bring to Iowa Compassion and Choices. Again, if you're not a speaker, please put your mute on the audio function. We're now turning back to Sue or Marilyn for the next set of trivia questions. So take it away.
Sue is here. And we need the next set of questions up, Angela.
Yeah, I'm gonna upload it too. And Denise too, if you want to put the link in the chat for the survey too.
The link is in the chat. It's at the very top of the chat.
I'm not sure if people that joined after you put the link in can see it though, so you might have to re-put it in.
Okay. I guess it was still there for me, so I thought it was there. Yes, I can put it in again, sure.
So there's 2 more questions here.
Okay, looks like we're up to question on which countries allow medical aid in dying. And this one I found very interesting. I was very surprised at the answer to this. So go ahead and make your choices. And then also the next question, in how many states and jurisdictions has medical aid in dying been authorized? Go ahead and make your choices. I'm going to go ahead and put mine in, although mine won't count, since I have the answers right in front of me.
The second question is, how many US states and jurisdictions have authorized medical aid in dying? And the answer is, go ahead, Sarah, and private message me again in Compassion and Choices. So the answer is none, or 11, or 25, or 50. And I think everybody has answered them. Is anyone still waiting to answer the second question? It looks like 2 more people answered the first question than the second question. That's okay. I'll go ahead and end this. Marilyn? Yeah?
Okay, if you want to stop screen share then, Angela.
Okay. Share. Okay, should I go ahead and start?
Well, let me just reintroduce you since I had poor connection. Marilyn Cruz is a highly valued volunteer for Iowa Compassion and Choices. Marilyn leads the Community Education and Enhancement Work Group in the informative Finish Strong Iowa webinar series. She's intimately involved with the newsletter and the dashboard feature of Iowa Compassion and Choices. Marilyn will now give an update on the Community Education and Enhancement Work Group. The CEE group has given us many Finish Strong webinars that are now attracting registrants beyond Iowa. In addition, the planning of this meeting was done by the CEE. We welcome your update, Marilyn.
Okay, I'm going to have a few slides here. Okay. Okay, can you all see the screen here?
Go back to it.
Oh,
No.
No.
okay. Wait, just a second. Okay. Okay. Okay, I don't know why that didn't come up. Okay.
There we go.
Oh, there we go. Okay, this is the CEE work group update. And most of you probably are familiar with our Finish Strong Iowa programs. We've done 3 since our last meeting. In November, we did one on Be Brave, Start the Conversation. That's where we introduced everyone to the death deck. In February, we had a whopping 90 people in our faith-based perspectives on end-of-life decisions. We had 4 clergy addressing religious objections to medical aid in dying. And then just recently, we had a program on death doulas, your guides and companions for your end-of-life journey. Okay, let me just move this. And that's not all. We have coming up in November a program that's called I'm Dead, Now What? And this will be on alternatives to traditional burials. So look forward you can look forward to that. We'll be sending materials on that, obviously, after probably October or so. We have a small but mighty team that does all of the planning and execution of these programs. Denise Chevalier, who spoke earlier, Sue Fabish, who just introduced the trivia quiz and the last set of questions, Diane Fagner, Joan Nobling, Marion Schwabauer, Hillary Strayer, and Dave Whitkey. These people just put in a great amount of effort, and we couldn't do it without them. We also are responsible for putting together a Finish Strong newsletter. And this, don't try to read the slide, but this was the old original version, and it was nothing more than an email with a few references to articles and videos. And as I say, we've come a long ways. And this is what the newsletter looks like now. It's a regular newsletter with art and graphics, thanks to Sue Fabish. We really come a long ways. And we have many more components to the newsletter. We have a welcome letter. We have perspectives, which could be editorials, book reports, film reviews, Media Matters, where we try to really do a good job of keeping track of how the media is talking about medical aid in dying and other death-related matters. We have updates from both the legislative work group and local action teams. We have upcoming events, and we just added a new feature called Ask a Death Doula. Sarah Callahan, one of our death doulas, writes this column, and she will welcome your questions. And then finally, we always feature a volunteer and tell you more about them and their work with Compassion and Choices. And the newsletter team is mainly myself, Sue Fabish, who does the graphic and layout, and then Marion is our advisor, and she is also corrects all the many mistakes that I make. So thanks to all of you. And I always want to say, what can you do to get involved in CEE? You can join our work group. We can always use, more people. The more people we have, the more we can get done. We meet every 3 weeks for about an hour, so it's pretty painless as far as a time commitment. We meet via Zoom. You can always submit an article for the Finish Strong Iowa newsletter. Maybe you've seen a great film recently, or come across a good book. You can also organize a talk on end-of-life planning at your church, synagogue, or other organization. And you don't have to do the speech yourself. We do have speakers who can talk to this issue. Also, if you do nothing more than let your friends and family know about our programming, that's very helpful. You can always pass on the newsletter. And finally, like so many people have done today, you can share your story both privately and publicly. So we welcome all of these efforts, and thank you for your support, and stay tuned for more. So I will turn it back over to Steve.
Thank you, Marilyn, and all the members of the CEE that bring liveliness and creativity to your planning session. Our next meeting segment is entitled Little, demonstrating how they convey the activities of compassion and choices. David Whitkey, our first speaker, has been involved with Compassion and Choices when it was predated by the Hemlock Society in dealing with personal autonomy at life's end. David is a retired sports editor with the Des Moines Register. Good morning, David.
Good morning to you all. I'm Dave Whitkey from the Unitarian Church in Des Moines. And I recently had an experience that I think illustrates several of the points that our previous speakers have made so eloquently. I had a friend in her 90s who was dying of a condition that she really dreaded. She'd been told she still had several months to live, but that she faced steadily increasing levels of pain and discomfort. Now, my friend's daughter called me to the hospital bedside because they remembered that I was involved with some outfit that preached a more graceful death. So I went to the bedside and I discussed with them the services and approaches of compassion and choices, including our efforts to gain legislation for medical assistance in dying. The daughter had never heard of such a thing as medical assistance in dying. And at first, she was really rather put off by the idea. But a few days later, she phoned me and she asked how they could obtain the pill because her mother was interested. I reminded her that Iowa doesn't have a law permitting medical assistance in dying. And at that point, she said she certainly wished they had known earlier about the opportunities in other states. A day later, the daughter called me back again and told me that her mother had decided to stop eating and drinking. She said she preferred that course of death over the painful future that she faced otherwise. And about 2 weeks later, she died, fading away peacefully. At that point, the daughter told me that her mom had asked her, the daughter, to find opportunities in the future to tell other people about compassion and choices, its services, and its goals, including legislation for medical aid in dying. Now, this struck me, this whole experience had a double effect on me about our work, because my friend who died had recently completed almost 2 decades of service as the state of Iowa's Director of Aging Services. She'd served under 2 different governors of different parties. And yet, despite all that experience at that level, she was still unfamiliar with the concept of medical assistance in dying and all the services that compassion and choices can offer people who are approaching death. So to me, this experience shows the real value and the need of our work to get the word out, even on just a one-to-one basis, to keep our mission in the public eye, and for us to keep emphasizing, both in public and in private, the need for a medical assistance in dying law here in Iowa. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, David. Your demeanor, patience, and kindness are wonderful qualities in your interactions with others. Denise Chevalier, whom you heard earlier, will now share her little victory story.
Yes. Not so very long ago, a friend saw the death deck card game on my dining room table. It says on the side of it, it's a lively game of surprising conversations. And so yes, it is a deck of cards, and it goes through, it helps people with to have conversations that oftentimes they are avoiding. I told him to check it out. He thought it looked very interesting, and I had not played it with anyone yet. We decided to give it a go, and we took turns drawing a card with a statement or question, and multiple choice answers. We read it aloud, and the other person guessed as to our answer. We were actually pretty on point with this response each one chose. We hadn't really talked about any of these before, and we had some good discussion. which is just exactly what the card is meant to initiate. It just felt like a natural conversation without the angst that we conjure in our own minds when we think of our own deaths or those of our loved ones. I encouraged him to document his wishes by giving him the CNC Advanced Planning Guide and Toolkit. Within a few days, he had gone through it. He remarked he thought it was fantastic. He thought everyone should have this and this kind of guidance. And he went on to prepare his advance directive. This little victory was really about my own aha moment. I'd been reticent to have conversations around this a subject, even though I wanted to advocate for openness and honesty about the end of life situations. So this really helped me to relax a bit about broaching the subject with my, particularly with my closest relationships. And I think that as already going forward, I feel much more relaxed, much more natural. It feels much more natural for me to bring this up. And so for me, that really was a personal little victory.
Thank you, Denise, for presenting another example where you had an opportunity arise and you seized the moment. Now we'll return back to Sue Fabish, and she'll challenge you with the final set of trivia questions regarding compassionate choices. The tabulations are occurring as the answers come in, so Sue will announce the winner of the Caitlin Clark Memory Book. Please proceed, Sue.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, this is your last two chances to win our beautiful coffee table book that my lovely assistant, Dave Whitney, was just holding up. He generously has donated the prize for us, and we're grateful to him for that. So our last two questions are, first of all, which U.S. states do not have a residency requirement for people requesting medical aid in dying? Most states require you to live in the state and have to have lived there for a specific amount of time. There are two states that do not have a residency requirement. So go ahead and make your choice on that one. And then the last question, your last chance to win our coffee table book about Caitlin Clark, is what is the name of the 2024 bill that would allow medical aid in dying? So what's the name of the bill that has been submitted to our legislature? And those are your choices there. So make your, let me see if I have the right answer. Has everyone submitted their answers yet?
Okay, I'm gonna end it and then it's just gonna take me like 30 seconds to calculate it. So Denise, if you want to repost the link for the survey in there and let people know that's just a survey to give feedback on this, then by the time you're done with that, I'll hopefully have an answer for you all. Okay.
I reposted it 10:29, just after Marion. Thank you, Marion, for sharing on such a personal level. And I have a survey link. You can sign up for the newsletter and the survey link as well. I saw that as a post.
Oh, excellent.
How are we doing, Sue?
I am not the one tabulating, so I hope it's coming soon.
Yeah, I just
Not
gotta
only do
do,
they have,
I just gotta do
yeah,
the
not
last
only,
one.
okay, and, you know, not only do they have to be added up, but in the case of a tie, a winner will be randomly picked from those who had the most correct answers. So that takes a little bit of time also.
Do you want to go over and say what the answers are while I do this?
Ooh, I can try.
Oh,
Well, let me see what order they were in. Since I missed the first two. Okay. The first question was, when someone uses medical aid in dying at the end of their life, the cause of death is listed on the death certificate as, was that the first one?
yes.
Does anyone know? Okay. Okay, the answer was the patient's disease. So if someone had been suffering with cancer and they used medical aid in dying to end their suffering, that's not what's put on the death certificate. Cancer is put on the death certificate, and that helps relieve any stigma they're afraid people will have against medical aid in dying. Okay, and the second question, I believe, was what percentage of self-identified Republicans believe in a mentally sound adult with an incurable terminal disease who has only 6 months or less to live should have the legal option to obtain prescription medication to pass peacefully in their sleep, known as medical aid in dying. So, what percentage of self-identified Republicans agree with medical aid in dying? And the answer to that was rather surprising to me, 68%. So I thought that was very interesting. Question number 3 then was, in which of these countries is medical aid in dying allowed? And this was another surprising one to me because the answer was Spain, which is Catholic country. So I was rather surprised by that. Number 4 was how many U.S. states or jurisdictions have authorized medical aid in dying? And I don't have my answer here, but was it 11?
11.
11. Okay, good. I'm glad I do know the answer. So 11 states and jurisdictions, and we had to add jurisdictions because Washington, D.C. sadly is not yet a state. And has everyone submitted 5 and 6? I believe they have. The question number 5 was, which states do not have a residency requirement? And the answer to that was Vermont and Oregon. And the last question, what is the name of the act that would have been created? And that was Iowa Our Care, Our Options Act.
Okay, we have the winners too. And so this is to win the book that David held up. And David, I'm going to let you know that you were one of the 5 winners. So I'm assuming you will pass on the book.
Yes, just take my name off the list, thanks.
I figured. And Denise was another winner. I don't know where you are. Oh, there you are, Denise. So I don't know. So it was Karen was a winner. Sarah O'Callaghan was a winner. Denise, and then I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right, but it came up on the computer as Twyla Kerr.
Twyla.
Oh, there you are. Okay. So great job.
So take me out of it.
Yeah, Denise and Dave are ineligible.
Okay.
So
So
are we going to draw names out of a hat for this? Sue?
Well, I don't have the names in front of me, so it's going to be hard.
Okay.
I can draw the names. Just give me a number between 1 and 20. Marilyn.
Oh, okay. 15.
Okay. So Twyla.
Yay.
And the other thing I can do for the winners is Compassionate Choices. We recently partnered with the Death Deck, and so we have our own kind of mini version of the Death Deck. So I can send those to all 3 winners so that you have them.
That would be nice. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know how you folks figured out that Spain was one of the countries that allows medical aid in dying. Yeah, I thought everybody would say Norway, but pretty smart group.
Okay, well, we'll kind of wrap it up. I want to again thank Marilyn Cruz and the Continuing Education and Enhancement Work Group for planning this annual meeting. Thanks to Molly Graziano, Senators Nate Bolton and Janice Weiner, Representative Sue Cahill, Denise Chevalier, Marion Schwabauer, Dave Wicke, and Susan Fabish. Thank you for your attendance and participation. Each of you can be messengers to expand the work of Compassionate Choices. You saw the challenge that Molly offered in her presentation. What are we going to do? What are you going to do between now and September 1 to expand the reach of Compassionate Choices, either by sharing with another, coming up with an organization that we can do presentations for, but to keep the activity alive. I invite each of you to reflect on the information shared to members. You will receive a brief follow-up questionnaire by email. We will use the responses in planning future meetings. I bid you a wonderful weekend. Our thanks for being here and our gratitude for the work you do for Compassionate Choices. Again, I apologize for my internet connection, but I wish you to be well and have a good day.
I just want to jump on and stay open for a bit so that people can get into the chat and they can connect to the link, to the survey link.
So is this the same survey that's going to be emailed out?
Yes.
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how do people get on the email list? If can you just explain exactly what to do? I think I heard someone say if you respond to the survey, but do you need to put your email address in the survey, I guess is my question, because I don't see that it's requested. Oh, there it is. Yes, it is. Okay. So now I see how it works. I answered my own question. Thank you. Okay.
Can you tell me how we get a copy of the Death Deck?
You can order it online. I'll put the link here.
My survey link is telling me that this is a suspicious link that I should not go to for fear of hacking.
I just put the link to the Death Deck in there.
So is there a button to click to ignore the warning? Dave?
Yes, there is, but I usually don't do that.
Well, the other thing you can do is retype the URL into your browser bar.
Or just wait until you get the survey later on.
I just ignored that warning and filled it out.
Yeah, and I just also put the link to it's just a lot longer, but the Google form of it. So you should be able to get in that one too.
Thanks, Angela.
Did I hear there's also an Iowa version of the death deck that's shorter or something, or?
We have a compassion and choices one, so it's not Iowa specific.
Oh, okay. That's on the website?
It's not on the website yet. They're not available to purchase yet.
Okay.
And did someone get Twyla's info? The book can be sent to her.
I probably have it in our system. Oh, you're still on Twyla, unless you want to give it to either Marion or David.
Okay, I can do that. But I think I am in the system.
Thank you, Elaine, for joining us.
Well, I'll say so long, everybody, and enjoy the ending of the Olympics this weekend. Thanks for being on the call. Good day.
Thanks. Good job, Iowa.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you, everyone. Okay.
Thank you.